What's wrong?
I'm dying, sister.
Okay.
Yeah, I got TB. I got it. Beating a man to death for a few bucks.
And just like that, a life full of blind loyalty leading to robbing, killing, and going on the run comes to an end. Red Dead Redemption 2 has recently just hit its 3-year anniversary, and with all the excitement and love fans have for the consecutive 9-year run of Grand Theft Auto 5, and of course with that game hitting its upcoming 4th iteration on the next generation of consoles within the same decade, along with how amazingly well the Grand Theft Auto Definitive Editions turned out to be, I wanted to revisit one of Rockstar's most crowning achievements in storytelling and world building. Arguably still a very young series with only 2 installments and often dismissed as nothing more than GTA with horses, Red Dead Redemption is a series that not only lets this team flex their creative talents that even its more popular GTA series really can't come close to, but gives proper example of just how well games can tell a story like no other medium can, juggling historical accuracy, personal development, a detailed group dynamic, and supporting a gameplay approach that's as free and as open-ended as Grand Theft Auto, while ensuring this gameplay approach doesn't break any established boundaries of the narrative, both fictional and not. It pays greater attention to detail, with a proper mix of historical correct buildings, weapons, environments, and overall way of life, while still feeling distinctly Rockstar with a pinch of satire thrown in. Like having a KKK meeting in the middle of the woods with it going horribly wrong in the funniest way possible, or running across a pig farm, owned by siblings that have a relationship much more common than any of us would want to believe it is.
When we was kids, before we lost our ma and pa, horrible business.
Horrible.
But we still got each other, ain't that right, honey pie?
And we still know how to have the hog killing time.
Here, that's for you.
Yeah.
There.
While GTA is more on the life of a criminal with parodies that run parallel to ourselves in modern events, Red Dead is more of a historical and personal lesson, arguably the lesson being that the only thing truly promised to any of us that's undeniable in the end is death. Our time here is finite, life is short and ugly, and it's up to us to make the most of it. And weirdly, just like in life, with this game it's best to take your time and do as much as you can with everyone you come across, as this game doesn't end with the death of Arthur. As a matter of fact, his death is made even more personal with the more side content you complete. The beginning cutscene with the nun I showed is actually only available by completing a handful of optional side missions earlier in the game, making this whole encounter being something you could potentially miss, one of the saddest moments in the entire game.
You're too smart for me, sister. I guess I'm afraid. It's been a bad few weeks, but Dutch being Dutch, he is busy making plans, and Dutch being Dutch, those plans involve robbery and dreams.
Now the story kicks out very slow, which was and still is probably the biggest critique I hear from anyone who first plays it, which I see both sides of the argument. On the one hand, people just want that fantasy outlaw cowboy freedom to drunkenly fist fight in a saloon, duel some stranger in the middle of a street, and then shoot up an entire town, which you can do all these things in due time. It's something you won't be able to do for roughly 2 hours into the game. You see, the whole first chapter, while it only consists of 5 missions, is important for both setting the stage narratively as well as introducing you to all the basics in the game. The first 2 levels alone gets you acquainted with basic movement on and off your horse, gunplay, fist fighting, scavenging for supplies, and the importance of eating and keeping your cores high. To increase the efficiency of that attributes regeneration speed like your health and overall stamina, what happens when you get cold, horse bonding, the ability to hitch, lead, calm, pat, feed your horse, all actions going towards your horse bonding level, which later on is quite important. I mean, it affects the distance you can call your horse's health, stamina, ability to do tricks like rear on command, slide to a stop, drift sideways, plus stowing your weapons on your horse's saddlebags, picking up your weapon off the ground, and most importantly of all, retrieving your hat. And then you have the 3rd or 4th mission, depending on the order that you beat them in, completely dedicated to all the systems involved in hunting, which is quite extensive in of itself. Basic rundown, Arthur has his own scent animals can pick up on depending on you being up or downwind. You can track animals through Deadeye and find their scent or track marks that way, and the method of killing is quite important, as hunting rabbits with a double barrel shotgun can result in lower quality pelts and meat, which in turn affect crafting outfits or even selling those pelts for extra money. So, while not able to free roam for quite some time, in the meantime you're acquainted with all the systems in the game. You're also treated to mumblings of the events leading up to the gang's current situation. Dutch Vanderlyn, the gang's leader, was planning a ferry robbery in the town of Blackwater, alongside Micah Bell, a relatively new face of the gang that in the short while he's been with them has been known to lose his head and has an affinity for just killing at will. As it turns out, while the robbery started out just fine, it ended in tragedy, with a member of the Vanderlyn gang by the name of Jenny Kirk getting killed, two other members, Sean McGuire and Mac Callender, getting captured, and Mac's brother, Davey Callender, dying on their retreat up north into the mountains. John Marston and Charles Smith were also injured, although they sustained minor injuries compared to the rest. Arthur Morgan, this game's protagonist, wasn't involved in the planning or even the execution of the robbery, as he and Hosea Matthews, Dutch's right-hand man and voice of reason, were planning a real estate scam that was set to take place the day after the ferry robbery. Now with the robbery, a giant failure and seemingly a setup, the gang was forced to leave their money and all their belongings behind and flee north into the mountains. This is where they settled into an old abandoned mining camp by the name of Colter, and it's important to point out that during this time frame where the gang is up in these mountains, you get to see what the gang's dynamic was like just before the fall. Everyone under Dutch's command loves and respects this charismatic leader. The hunting mission with Charles Smith is especially important because you get a lot of dialogue into the psychology of everyone. Dutch has always carried the gang through and hasn't failed him yet, putting their needs before his. So in this time of unfortunate blunders, the gang must support him as he has for them all these years. Arthur and Charles also have vastly different time frames with the gang, yet their notion of Dutch being different than just any other outlaw leader are equally the same. Arthur was adopted by Dutch and Hosea at a young age, and they taught him to read, while Charles is treated fairly as an equal, something completely unheard of in those days, as Charles is half African American and half Native American. So with all this in mind, it's easy to see how, even though Javier Escuela has mentioned that Dutch killed a girl in a bad way that's completely out of character for him, Arthur's quick to come to denial, as that's not the man who raised him. The man he knows that raised him taught him to read, write, doesn't kill indiscriminately, or go on foolish missions based on revenge. A man whose gang is all about being family and separating themselves from the other savage gangs running from the law. A notion that's further backed by this conversation.
I reckon you're okay. This suits me. Sure, I could fall in with another gang, but Dutch... You know, Dutch is different.
Oh, yes. Dutch is certainly different.
He treats me fair. Most of you do. And for a fellow with a black father and an Indian mother, that ain't normally the case.
Well, we need you now. More than ever.
Good. And how long have you been with these boys? Why ain't you run off?
Me? Oh, 20 years, something like that. Since I was a boy.
20 years?
Yeah. He taught me to read. John, too. Taught me a few other things, him and Hosea.
Huh. I'm sure.
Dutch saved me. Saved most of us. That's why we need to stick by him through this. He always sees us right.
While settling into Colter, Dutch, Arthur, and Micah scout ahead, and they end up running into a homestead owned by Jake and Sadie Adler. Unfortunately, a few days prior, members from the rival O'Driscoll gang took over their homestead, killing Jake and turning Sadie into a widow. It's not until after clearing out the homestead of all the O'Driscolls, Micah ends up finding Sadie hidden in the cellar, and Dutch decides to take Sadie back with them as her house goes up in flames. Returning to the gang with another mount to feed, the situation isn't entirely hopeless. Arthur managed to learn where Colm O'Driscoll, the leader of the O'Driscoll's gang, and Dutch's fierce rival was held up, and that he's sitting on some explosives that he's planning to use to rob a train. The very reason why the O'Driscolls are even up in the mountains to begin with. Dutch hatches a plan to hit Colm's camp, steal the explosives, and then use them to rob the train for himself. Then, using the money lifted off the train as a means to start anew out east away from the mess they created in Blackwater. With a new plan, new destination, and a new means to reach the ends of getting away from the law, the excitement has to hold for now. The burning flame of hatred and revenge has to be reeled in, as there's one missing within our own ranks.
He's strong, and he's smart.
Strong, at least. Hello, Arthur.
Abigail?
Arthur, how you doing?
Just fine, Abigail. And you?
I need you to... I'm sorry to ask, but...
It's little John. He's got himself caught into a scrape again.
He ain't been seen in 2 days.
Your John will be fine. I mean, He may be as dumb as rocks and as dull as rusted iron, but that ain't changing because he got caught in some snowstorm.
John Marston, in the very early rushed escape of the gang into the mountains, was sent to scout ahead. Now, he's an interesting character and worth mentioning for a few reasons, and seeing how I'm basically spoiling everything, let me just give you a quick footnotes. Marston is a protagonist from the 2010 Red Dead Redemption chronological sequel. He's Arthur's adopted younger brother who was also taught to read and write by Dutch and Hosea, just like Arthur was, but despite seemingly being close at its time, as you've seen in the cutscene, Arthur isn't so keen to go and search for him. The relationship between the two goes deeper than just answering the questions that easily link both games, and it basically boils down to Arthur feeling a sense of betrayal from his younger brother, as John up and left the gang behind, including his wife Abigail and son Jack, for a full year. A move that for most of the game is obviously a spot of tension between the two, with Arthur's patience being veil thin towards him in the earliest interactions between the two, and even openly expressing concerns of being able to trust John's intentions on multiple occasions. Finally convinced to go on search for him, it appeared Abigail's concerns weren't for nothing. John was rescued just in time as he was attacked by a pack of wolves. His horse was eaten, and he was left with some serious wounds, including his iconic facial scars. Arthur and Javier Escuela bring him back to camp to lick his wounds, and now with everyone accounted for that retreated into the mountains with them, it was now time to hit home, which went on to be a major success. The gang got the dynamite, train plans, and even a nice souvenir. Kieran Duffy, a member of the O'Driscolls.
I got a saying, my friend. We shoot fellas as need shooting, save fellas as need saving, and feed 'em as need feeding. We are gonna find out what you need. I can't believe it! An O'Driscoll in my camp!
I ain't an O'Driscoll, mister! I hate that fella!
Kieran probably decided he wasn't a member anymore after being bitch slapped by Colm in front of everyone. With the weather now clearing up and having the means to pull off the train robbery, Dutch leads a group of the most fit men the gang has to pull off the heist, while everyone else behind gets the camp ready to ship out to Horseshoe Overlook. Successfully lifting a decent amount of money and bonds off the train, the gang then hastily relocates out of the mountains.
Got off the mountain, rode east into some pretty enough country called the Heartlands. Ain't been this far east in many a year. Dutch seems a little better. His eyes are sparkling once more, and I can see he's thinking a little clearer. I think we all feel a little happier, despite of Blackwater and that whole mess.
With the start of the second chapter, the game really starts to open up, giving you full access to the expansive world of Red Dead Redemption 2. From solving murder mysteries and tracking down the killer that's leaving behind all the dismembered corpses, random events in the world that lead to tips on homestead robberies or shady business going on around certain shops in each town.
Let me into that back room of yours right now.
Sir, please. You don't want to get involved with them, I promise you.
Running into unique people and interesting locations that Arthur even tends to write down in his notebook. A notebook that you can go back and look into at any time during the game. It's another reason I'd also suggest that you do as much side content as possible, as not only does it add to the overall believability of Arthur being a real person, and potentially missing out on very unique cutscenes, but it also adds to the sentimentality of the notebook itself, as it's later inherited by John, who can go back and look at all these events through his brother's eyes.
You should keep that thing in a cage. You should think about who you're serving. Give me a beer, will you?
He even adds to it himself. It's a chapter that, while adding to the gang's ever-changing situation of running from the law, continues to show how deep the bond between Dutch and those he looks for is still far from being broken, while introducing many more gameplay mechanics like weapon maintenance, deeper horse spawning, grooming, outfit and weapon customization, and even doing side jobs like bounty hunting. With the gang now safely out of the mountains and Dutch adamant that they are still on course for the intended plan, everyone goes on to earn their share. Herr Strauss puts out money to be collected by Arthur. Hosea, while working on selling the bonds lifted off the train, gets to work on a line fencing stagecoaches. The women learn of a potential train robbery and a heist off the Valentine Bank, while Pearson keeps everyone nourished and fed with fresh meat, expected to be supplied by you, and if you don't deliver and hang around camp just long enough, other characters will give you shit for it.
Mr. Morgan, folks is wondering what's happened to you.
Nothing, Miss Grimshaw.
Nothing is right. That's the point. That's the point. work, Mr. Morgan. Folk need feeding.
But after a few weeks of laying low at the new camp of Horseshoe Overlook, a saloon fight breaks out at Valentine, with it overflowing into the main street, with Arthur being stopped just short of killing the town brute by the name of Tommy, and he's stopped by a seemingly random Good Samaritan by the name of Thomas Downs.
You won the fight already. Surely that's enough.
What business is it of yours?
No business. No business, sir, but please, I beg you.
After breaking off to recuperate from the fight, Arthur runs into a man by the name of Josiah Trelawney, a loose member of the gang who's kept around for some useful information he provides. This time he comes with news of Sean McGuire, one of your men captured during the failed Blackwater robbery.
He's being held by some bounty hunters, trying to see how much money the government will pay them. I know he's in Blackwater.
With the whereabouts of Sean learned, now it's time for the gang to reclaim a member of theirs, lost to the failed Blackwater robbery. Arthur, Javier, Trelawney, and Charles all head back to the very city they nearly died from, trying so desperately to escape in an effort to save Sean from swinging at the end of a noose. Being ever so careful not to get caught by the very heavy Pinkerton presence that's in the area, the rescue mission is an overall success, with Sean safely returned back to camp at Horseshoe Overlook. And the gang celebrates the return of the man they knew very little of what happened to him over these past few weeks. And this is one of the few moments in the game where you can see the gang really act like a tight-knit family that truly care for one another.
I love you, bastards.
Have fun. Have lots of fun.
But now, on this wave of success, Dutch decides it's time to end a long-time rivalry once and for all. Since their arrival at the new camp, the gang's captive, Kieran Duffy, has largely been left alone to rot at the post he was tied to. Now with John recovered from his wolf attack and Sean safely returned, it was time for Dutch to use this prime opportunity to end the feud with Colm once and for all. Under threat of becoming a woman at the hands of Bill Williamson, Kieran is forced to lead an attack on Colm's camp with the objective of killing the man they all hate with a passion. But as luck would have it, Colm wasn't there. And in a twist of fate, Kieran actually ends up saving Arthur's life.
You alright?
Sure, thank you. You set us up. Come here!
What?
You set us up.
No, I didn't.
You did. Colm O'Driscoll ain't here!
He was here, I swear. If I was setting you up, I wouldn't have saved your life.
It's a good point, Arthur.
As Payman is allowed to stay as a free man and a fully fledged member of the gang from this point on. I want to take this opportunity to deviate from the gang a bit. This game's story is as much about Arthur as it is about the gang, and this chapter sets up a lot for the future chapters as well as expands a bit on what's already been vaguely established. Yes, you continue to see Arthur's standoffish feelings with John, his lack of caring for Micah, and very early on he even passes up the opportunity to let this man swing, making his and possibly the entire gang's existence much more peaceful, yet due to Arthur's love and loyalty to Dutch goes against his better judgment and saves Micah, resulting in much more bloodshed by shooting up an entire town. You see his close connection with Lenny start to form, his bond with Jack, and even a previous love interest that has resurfaced in his life. In this chapter, he's still very much loyal to Dutch and puts him and the gang before himself, believing in Dutch's plans, while being a very loud opponent to John, his return, and even his loyalty to not only his wife and son, but his adopted family he owes everything to, the Vanderlinde gang. Arthur's loyalty and his love to the man that saved him so long ago is far from being shaken, and he's still determined to help everyone reach the promised land, the dream that Dutch talks so much about, a dream that they all need money to realize. Yet it's not that simple, and it appears all the gang's recent good fortunes were to start crumbling down. The Pinkerton agency has been hot on Dutch's trail since they left Blackwater, and after hitting Leviticus Cornwall's train, Leviticus has dumped massive amounts of money into this agency in an effort to find those responsible for the robbery. On a small fishing trip with Jack just outside the watchful eye of the members at Horseshoe Overlook, Arthur and Jack are visited by two Pinkerton agents.
Agent Milton, Agent Ross. Pinkerton Detective Agency, seconded to the United States government. You're a wanted man, Mr. Morgan. $5,000 for your head alone.
The agents offer Arthur's freedom in exchange for giving up Dutch, and to absolutely no one's surprise, Arthur rejects the offer outright, claiming he hasn't seen Dutch in months. After a few tense moments created by Ross's confession to killing Mac, the other member captured during the failed Blackwater heist, the agents leave, giving Arthur the opportunity to head back to camp to inform Dutch of what just happened.
Were you followed back here? No, they nowhere near here. And they want you, Dutch. They offered me my freedom in exchange, they did.
Knowing the agents are now hot on their trail, and being stopped so close to camp, the gang needs to act fast to scrape up enough money to be able to relocate, and the time couldn't have been any better. There's Strauss has noticed one man is overdue on his payment and has asked Arthur to go and collect.
Farmer preacher fellow I met in Valentine, Mr. Down. He's more slippery than he seems. I've tried being polite. Don't take any nonsense. If he doesn't have the money, beat him.
Taking that last bit a little too seriously, once Arthur arrives at Thomas's farm, he doesn't hesitate to politely ask him for the money owed with a gentle steel toe to the mouth. Then he suggests he tricks out his wife for a few extra dollars on the low. Ultimately frustrated that Mr. Downs wasn't so willing to accept Arthur's tips to become an overnight pimp to pay off his debt, he leaves demanding they pay him next time he returns. A very small, innocent trip that both exhibits a coldness to Arthur, but also an important turning point early in the game's narrative. Thomas Downs is very clearly dying, and although we don't know it yet, he's actually dying from tuberculosis, and during this encounter, he ended up coughing blood onto Arthur's face. Arthur doesn't know it yet, but his fate has been sealed, and it's just a matter of time until this very situation comes back to haunt him. Returning to the camp empty-handed, the next move is for Arthur to meet up with John and Valentine, who has a job lined up where he plans to lift some cattle from some cowboys they can then auction off. With Arthur's help, it was an absolute breeze, and on their way back from stealing and dropping off the cattle, Arthur and John meet up with Herr Strauss and Dutch at a nearby bar. When Strauss and John are dismissed by Dutch, the two are held at gunpoint by none other than Leviticus Cornwall.
My name is Leviticus Cornwall. Get out here before I have these men killed.
Replicating the absolute bloodbath Arthur and Micah had up in Strawberry, Arthur, John, Dutch, and, well, Strauss was a little bit of a liability, ended up killing everyone old enough that was capable of walking on their own 2 feet. With the town of Valentine now littered with corpses, the Pinkertons and Leviticus well aware of the gang's whereabouts, it was time to pack up and move once more, in a desperate attempt to continue to stay ahead of the law.
Miss Grimshaw, Mr. Pearson, put everyone to work. Make this place a home. Well, I don't know where the hell we are, but we are going to make the best of it.
Heading deep into this game's version of the South, the land is filled with Ku Klux Klan meetings late into the night, ancestral relations running deeper than the pockets of those dominating the slave trade, English charlatans.
I had an act. The bravest woman in the world. The animal wrangler. Watch her tame wild beasts.
And you were the woman.
Of course I was the bloody woman, look at me.
And local bandits by the name of Lemoyne Raiders, a clique of Confederate Civil War veterans turned to a life of crime in the post-war years. The land is rough, but the gang have no choice but to accept their situation and look for the right opportunity to acquire the money needed for Dutch's promise of virgin lands in the West. After a few days of settling in at the new camp in Clemens Point, a relatively small character starts to become much more significant. Sadie Adler, the widow saved by Dutch, Arthur, and Micah up in the snow-covered mountains of Colter, is now finally coming out of her grief and is coming to blows with the camp's cook.
I'll skin this fat old coot and serve him for dinner.
Watch your damn mouth, you crazy goddamn fishwife!
Reluctant at first, Arthur decides it's best for everyone to let Sadie tag along on his trip into town. Now this is the first interaction between the two, and it's interesting because the two of them, especially Arthur, seems to have zero patience for Sadie, who seems to be all too willing to accept her new life as an outlaw.
Here we are.
So, what's the plan? I shoot the shopkeeper while you...
No! You insane?
I thought we was outlaws.
Outlaws, not idiots.
After this mission for a while, Sadie is unfortunately left as a background character, but the anger and eagerness to shed blood is shown here, and creeps up again much later, and even translates into her being a solid leader, stepping in and ensuring the gang survives when Dutch and everyone who'd be next in line to take charge went missing. But for now, her capabilities of being anything more than a housewife with a short temper is doubted by everyone around her, including Arthur himself. Once he returns from his run to the store with Sadie and getting his first taste of Lemoyne Raiders, Arthur meets up with Dutch and Hosea, who have plans to go on a fishing trip. Now you can actually still do the fishing trip with these two at the very end of the mission if you want, which is nice, as you do get a lot of background stories of Arthur and his two adopted fathers, solidifying the very deeply intertwined relationship between these three. But before doing so, the three of them have to rescue an old friend.
What did the silly fancy fop back there do? Nothing too terrible, I trust.
He was accused of running a gold mine and investment scam.
Oh, no. I'm sure he wasn't.
Good old pal Trelawney was locked in a cage in the middle of being transported to the jail of the nearby town of Rhodes. When the men he was locked up with broke free, Arthur helps the deputy capture the fugitives and bring them back to the sheriff, Lee Gray, in the town of Rhodes in exchange for Trelawney's freedom. But along the way, he gets a little history lesson and tour the local area, hearing of a long-standing feud between the two local families, one being the Grays, a bunch of tobacco farmers that own half the businesses in Rhodes, roads and are the law in the area. The other family are known as the Braithwaites, wealthy plantation owners turned to the business of illegal manufacturing of moonshine after the end of the Civil War. After being informed on rumors of a massive amount of Confederate gold being held somewhere between these two families, Dutch decides to place the gang in between the feud. Hoping to play both families to uncover the whereabouts of the rumored Confederate gold held between one of them, the gang starts to help one family while dealing hardship to the other. Under direct orders from Sheriff Gray of Rhodes, the gang helped take down the Braithwaites' illegal moonshine business.
Come on, you degenerate, no-good white trash!
And steal the Braithwaites' prized horses, all while they simultaneously give away the illegal moonshine for free in Rhodes, cutting into the Grays' profit margins, then taking the remainder of the moonshine they stole and using it to burn down the Grays' tobacco fields. Actions done at the behest of Catherine Braithwaite. The gang believe they're working with two families who they truly believe are too dumb and stuck in their own petty feuds to realize that they're even being played by the Vanderlyn gang. Some members, like Trelawney, say it's wise to exercise caution, but why be careful when you got them right where you want them? Ever since the tobacco fields have went up in flames, Bill's been mentioning that the Gray boys have been wanting some extra security for a job they got coming up, and he's asked Arthur to meet him in the town of Rhodes when the time comes. But before that opportunity even arises, an old thorn in everyone's side reemerges.
Dutch, you tell him, fat man. It's peace, Dutch. The O'Driscolls. I think there's a way.
What on earth are you talking about?
We got to talking, and they suggested a parlay to end things.
A chance for peace between the sworn rivals. It's interesting that Hosea believes it to be a trap, while Arthur gives in to the side of caution, agreeing with Hosea. Meanwhile, Dutch is reluctantly convinced by Micah to run the risk of walking into a trap to hopefully end the long-time feud. This is a dynamic that seems to echo the poor decision-making that got the gang into the long retreat into the mountains weeks ago. Back in Blackwater, where Arthur and Hosea chose to play it safe, Dutch, under the influence of Micah, took a gamble, lost his head, and put everyone at risk, and it appears history may be repeating itself. Well, as it turns out, the peace talks were in fact a trap, but the target here was actually Arthur. Colm captured Dutch's protege in the hopes to lure him back to free his son, where the authorities will be waiting for him.
The way I see it, they get him, they forget about me. They ain't the forgetting sort.
Arthur, however, ended up escaping and making his way all the way back to camp, where he then collapsed. After a few weeks in bed, recovering from his captivity and subsequent escape, Arthur finally meets up with Bill to follow through with the security job Bill lined up with the Grays.
We're stuck in the middle of some ancient feud, but instead of playing both sides, we're being used by both of them.
They were saying the Catherine Braithwaite.
Hey, hold up. This don't feel right.
Now it don't feel right. I could have told you that.
Sean McGuire, the first casualty since Blackwater, gets shot in the face during an ambush in Rhodes set up by the Gray family. Immediately after Sean gets shot, the remaining 3 members in town kill everyone, including Sheriff Gray. Clearly the Grays have caught on to the gang's activities, and the Braithwaites have as well.
Have you seen that boy, Jack?
No.
Where's my goddamn son? Where is he? Where's my son? They took him, didn't they? They took my son.
Who took him?
We think the Braithwaite woman took him.
Realizing there is no Confederate gold between the Grays or the Braithwaites, almost every single able-bodied man in the Vanderlyn gang head straight to Braithwaite Manor, where they confront them for taking Jack. The confrontation leads to a gunfight where every Braithwaite is slaughtered, their manor is set on fire, and Catherine is dragged outside.
Where's the boy?
My sons gave him to Angelo Bronte. So my guess is Saint Denis. Either there or on my boat to Italy.
Let's go!
With the Grays and Braithwaite's entire family tree being annihilated, the gang head back to camp to plan their next move on how to get Jack back from the city of Saint Denis when the Pinkertons finally catch up to them. In this moment, with a member recently killed and their youngest member taken, with so much hope and promises tied to the Confederate gold that never came, the gang's loyalty and love for their charismatic leader is tested and no one budges.
I don't want to kill all these folk, Dutch. Just you.
In that case, it'd be my honor to join you. Excuse me, friends. I have an appointment to keep with...
With it all going to hell, the bonds of each member are stronger than ever before. But be that as it may, under threat of being revisited by an entire army of lawmen, the gang are forced to put the rescuing plans on the back burner and relocate to an abandoned mansion in the woods just outside of Saint Denis.
Both are full of parasites, reptiles, and slime. We're a long way east to land we know, and far from real open country.
I'm going to change how we discuss this chapter and combine chapter 5 of Guarma with it, and I'm not going to give so much a play-by-play, but discuss Rockstar's approach, as this is where the beginning of the end starts to creep in very subtly. Red Dead Redemption 2's story isn't just about the gang, Dutch, and answering the previous years of John Marston, but the story of our protagonist Arthur Morgan. The chapter of Saint Denis shows the highlight of the gang's closeness and love for one another, as the celebration after the safe return of Jack from Angelo Bronte is more cheerful than any before it, and there's never another scene like this in the game. We see the blossoming of Sadie Adler, showing she's more than capable of handling herself in a fight. Tilly Jackson saved from her old running mates, and Arthur helping nuns out on Saint Denis. But this chapter is also marked by tragedy and death. Kieran Duffy, the captured O'Driscoll turned Vanderlyn member after saving Arthur's life, is killed during an ambush by the O'Driscolls at their new camp. This is where Dutch begins to loosen his grip on his long-cherished morals, planning revenge on Angelo Bronte, who previously set him up by giving him bad information on a robbery at a trolley station that turned out to be a trap. In the end, instead of ransoming Bronte as was the initial plan, he ends up killing him in a fit of rage.
You repulsive little maggot! Call them now! You call them!
Visibly, the other members are shook by this uncharacteristic, bloodthirsty behavior of their leader, but it seems to be Arthur and John most disturbed, the two who are both taken in by this mentor, killing for the sake of it in the most brutal way possible. Where Saint Denis starts off intense and exciting, leading to a real promise of the gang actually getting away, possibly escaping to a tropical island by the name of Tahiti, where Dutch has promised they'd be ranchers. They just have to hit this last big city bank. But that ends in tragedy with the death of Arthur's close respected friend, Lenny, and the even bigger blow to the entire gang was the death of Hosea, just moments earlier being shot by Pinkerton agent Milton in front of the entire gang that's holding up the bank.
No! God damn it!
There's your deal, Dutch.
Hosea.
Dutch's right-hand man and voice of reason, Arthur's other adopted father, is now gone, something that truly adds to the sense of bleak hopelessness the chapter ends in. But what I find to be the most interesting in this entire chapter is this is where Arthur's cough starts to slowly reveal itself. The player is so preoccupied with the robberies, killings, and getting away. On your first run, you'll never notice that subtle cough Arthur's developing, and you won't think twice because as of now, he hasn't been officially diagnosed, and his run-in with Thomas Downs was so long ago it won't even register. I also want to point out that the first time the cough shows is actually in another of the money lending missions. It's not yet a deathly cough, but it does register as the first time he has it.
Analyze our business here?
This is filthy work.
We'll need money in Australia.
And it shows up again very briefly on the boat to Angelo Bronte's. The chapter of Saint Denis is the beginning of the end, with Arthur's slow fail in health, Dutch's descent to madness, and the gang's tightness slowly starting to unravel. The chapter ends with the failed bank robbery in Saint Denis, leaving two dead. Dutch, Arthur, Micah, Javier, and Bill hiding on a boat that ends up sinking in the middle of a storm, ultimately crash landing them on a tropical island of Guarma, while John was captured, an element that both John and Dutch start using against one another in future confrontations between the two of them.
So what happened with John in that bank?
He survived. Unlike dear Hosea and Lenny. The only one they took alive. Why is that, you think?
I don't know. I was already on the roof. I didn't see it.
And Abigail, I presume she was able to slip away in time.
What are you talking about?
You know, when I look back at all the chaos of the past few weeks, the apparent superficial chaos, I begin to wonder, maybe, for somebody, this is all going exactly to plan.
Dutch didn't want us breaking you out. Said it wasn't the right time, so... Might not be the hero's welcome you're imagining.
So much for no man left behind. I can't stop thinking about this. In the bank, when they grabbed me, he saw it. Felt almost like he had a a moment to do something and didn't.
But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Right now with the chapter of Gorma, the main things that are established are, as I just shown. Dutch is starting to think John may have something to do with all the gang's recent misfortunes, showing the early stages of him already starting to turn against his adopted son, who he's already implying betrayed him. Arthur, finally after all this time of blind loyalty to his beloved mentor and father, witnesses firsthand Dutch kill an old woman in cold blood.
So how did you know she was gonna betray us? What'd she say?
It was in her eyes, in the way she was leading us.
But you said you knew Spanish.
I know human beings, Arthur.
Are you gonna strangle me next?
The first time in the entire game, and probably in his entire life, he starts to finally think critically for himself and take a good look at Dutch, his actions, and what he's saying. And most importantly, this time precipitates Arthur's health decline. The stress, malnourishment, and lack of sleep is too much for his body to handle. Sure, everyone else that got stranded on the island with him looks like shit as well, but that pale face and sickly eyes never leave and only gets worse from here. While initially I was never a big fan of this chapter, its importance can't be overlooked, as it is the pivotal point. Dutch is different. Arthur sees it, but the gang still comes first to Arthur. And that may no longer be the case for Dutch, whether if he sees it or not.
My lord, what a goddamn mess. Everything. Not sure what happens next. The whole thing has been hard on all of us. Most of all on Dutch, who seems half crazed by all we've gone through.
Chapters 4 and 5 are the shifts in Dutch and the gang, while 6 is the shift in Arthur. Beaver Hollow has a lot of things going on. Arthur being diagnosed with tuberculosis and his health rapidly going downhill. The rescue of John from Siska Penitentiary by Arthur and Sadie against Dutch's orders.
John! What are you doing here?
It's good to see you too, partner.
I meant I hadn't sent for you yet.
I will.
But I said that.
Yeah, I know what you said. I felt different.
Is that so?
Dutch playing the US military against the Wapiti Indians as his diversion, but this chapter has 3 main things to convey, and they all stem from one main source: Arthur's declining health. He now knows his time is rapidly coming to an end, and everyone around him knows it as well. There's even a very small effect on your gameplay where your stamina and health cores can only regenerate so much. You know, it's not very punitive or even a grand hindrance to the gameplay overall, but it's still there and worth mentioning. But Arthur's sick. Dutch is beginning to move further and further away from the man he once was, and becoming more the bloodthirsty monster he told everyone around him not to be.
And I seen you killing folk in cold blood like you always told me not to.
He even begins to show contempt towards Arthur, believing his beloved son is turning against him. There's even moments where Dutch mocks Arthur's health.
If you help me return the horses to my men...
Well, Arthur needs to rest.
Micah, too, even begins to be more blatant in his disrespect towards Arthur. The tension between the two was there throughout the entire game, but it's clear Micah's gotten more into Dutch's ear, and with Arthur no longer looking so hot, it's now where he really starts to push Arthur's buttons.
Ah, there he is. Old Black Lung Morgan.
Shut up.
Was you followed?
Excuse me?
Was you followed?
You know who you're talking to.
I ain't sure. I ain't sure about much no more. All I know is there's law whenever you're around.
Is that so? Because it seems to me that since you've been riding with us, there ain't been nothing but trouble. Stirring things up all the time, getting in Dutch's ear. Seems wherever you is, there's Pinkertons and vice versa. So you better watch your goddamn mouth, boy! Or...
Take it easy, cowboy. You're gonna do yourself a mischief, way your head.
Micah, shut it!
He started it!
This treatment, though, isn't exclusive to just them two either. On a mission to rescue Abigail, who was kidnapped by Agent Milton, Sadie has Arthur hang back under the excuse of him being a better shot.
How you feeling?
I'm okay.
I think you should cover me and I'll go in there and get her. 'Cause you're the better shot, I mean.
That ain't what you mean. I can still fight.
I know, Arthur, but just do it my way, honey. It's for the best.
Arthur's fall from grace is felt at every point during this entire chapter, but it's hard to see it as an entirely bad thing. Dutch's ever-slipping grip on reality isn't just noticeable to John and Arthur, the rest of the gang have taken note as well, and each member has slowly started to desert the camp, with only those being loyal to Dutch to the bitter end hanging back. The once thriving, prosperous camp is now a ghost town with only the gunslingers left behind. Charles, Javier, Bill, Micah, John, Arthur, Sadie, Dutch, and 2 of Micah's associates associates are all that's left. And as far as Arthur's concerned, Sadie, John, and John's family's safe escape out of this life is all he wants to see happen before he draws his final breath. But that's not all he's doing. On the side, he's helping Charles with the Indians who Dutch is playing, instigating a war between the Indians and the US government in an attempt to get the pressure off him. But truly, the best stuff, as I shown at the start of the video with the cutscene involving the nun, is all in the side content. Besides this utter moment of sadness between Arthur and Sister Calderon, in a moment where he's trying to save his brother, who after all this time of hurt feelings of betrayal at the start of the game are closer now than they seem to have ever been, with just them two looking out for each other, since the Dutch turned his back on them and left them both to die on separate occasions. Arthur also makes amends to Edith and Archie Downs, the widow and son of the deceased Thomas Downs, who infected Arthur so long ago.
I ain't looking for forgiveness. It ain't about that. And don't forgive me. Just take the money and get out of here, please. I know I ruined your life. I suffer for it every day. But don't let yourself get killed for pride. I seen it kill too many folk. Don't say anything. Don't thank me. Just take the money and pack your bags.
Before everyone leaves the camp, if you do all of Herr Strauss's money-lending missions up to this point, you get a final one where Arthur is sent to collect the money from a man by the name of Arthur Londonderry. Londonderry consequently worked himself into the grave trying to get the gang back their money, and he left behind a woman and child.
You want my boy's shoes? You want the food out of our bellies, what little there is? You want me to lie down for you?
No.
Arthur gave everything to pay your bills. Everything. And now there's some fellas coming to take the house.
Touched by this family's unfortunate situation, Arthur forgives the debt, gives them enough money to keep their house, and then he heads back to camp where he evicts Strauss. And while this eviction of Strauss and the helpful hands of the Downs and Londonderrys are memorable in their own rights, it's Arthur's interactions with Charlotte that had a bigger impact on me. Initially, you come across her as some random widow sitting at a tombstone crying, starving, and counting her days until she meets the same fate as her husband who's inside the grave she's crying at. Arthur teaches her how to hunt, shoot a gun, and ultimately survive on her own. He saved her from dying out in the wilderness, an environment she was totally unprepared to survive in. And with Arthur's help, she was no longer vulnerable to the elements. Yet, on their final interaction, Arthur has an episode of uncontrollable coughing and blacks out.
Get you some water.
No, I'm fine. I just, thank you for this. I think it's best if I make...
Stay right there. It's gonna be okay.
If you already have played Red Dead Redemption 2, then you already know how touching this final chapter is. The camp at Beaver Hollow eventually ends up being overran by Pinkertons. Arthur and John are stuck to fend for themselves against the onslaught, while Dutch, Javier, Bill, and Micah escape. If you have a high enough honor, Arthur has a quick sentimental scene where he thanks his horse for everything.
Come on, brother. Let's go.
Give me a second.
Come on! Push, Arthur!
Thank you.
Arthur!
Then he says farewell to his adopted brother after giving him his satchel containing his journal and weapons and his hat. He's then ambushed by Micah and says his final goodbye to the man he devoted his entire life to.
God damn you. It is over. Now, Arthur, it's over. Oh, Dutch. He's right. You know it, and I know it.
He's sick. He's dying. He's talking crazy.
Up there on the ridge!
I gave you all I had. I did.
Come on. Dutch. Let's go, buddy. We made it. We won. Come on.
John made it. He's the only one. The rest of us... I tried. In the end, I did.
Come on. Let's go. We can make it. Come on, Dutch. Come on! Ah!
And then Arthur dies peacefully, staring at the sunrise. And for a lot of people, this is the end of the game, because after this, you play as John, and he fucking sucks in comparison.
What? What choice did I have? Just answer me that. What was I supposed to do?
Pathetic. Can't even get his woman in order. That jokes aside, the rest of this game, there's actually 2 epilogue chapters, and truth be told, in these 2 chapters, I would say Rockstar goes above and beyond in connecting a lot of dots and explaining what exactly happens from Red Dead Redemption 2 to the original Red Dead, which is a prequel. You see how John acquires his ranch, you see his transition from being an outlaw on the run to try and earn an honest living. You watch him build his ranch with the help of Uncle and Charles. You see him propose to Abigail with Arthur's ring. Gameplay wise too, if you venture out into the open world and you come across interesting locations, you see John right inside Arthur's journal, continuing to expand, and if you look closely you can see a distinct difference between both of their handwriting. But the highlight of the epilogue is this is a world that still feels Arthur's presence. Besides John now owning his journal, hat, and weapons, you at any point can go and visit Arthur's grave. There's characters in the open world and even some side missions you can wrap up and visit as John to get some unique dialogue.
I used to know a fella, a bit like you. A few years back, crazy kind of fella. But he had a heart on him.
What was his name?
I forget. Funny face. Alan. Or something, I think. He didn't like me much neither. But he was okay.
I think he died.
Can I help you?
I think I might be able to help you. My name's John Marston. I heard about your work through an old friend of mine, Arthur Morgan. He passed some time ago.
Ah, yes, of course I remember. Arthur, fine fellow. What a shame.
Hell, you can even find some old Vanderland gang members that have long moved on from their old ways of living.
All right now. Silly romances, but it's fun. Oh, it's such fun.
Do you?
My pen name is Leslie Dupont. Sort of French, sort of ambiguous. The books are unambiguously awful, but they sell.
Good for you. I'm so proud.
I still think about you all. That was quite a time.
Yeah. Arthur saved my life before he passed. I don't talk about him much, but I think about him.
Me too.
There isn't too many games that I really sit back and able to thoroughly enjoy time and time again. Story or gameplay wise, everything wears thin on me pretty fast, yet this game hasn't done that. And as long as this video is, I feel like I still haven't done this game enough justice. Frankly, it's one you really have to sit down, take your time, and experience the whole world and everything it has to offer on your own, because I've only scratched the surface. Let's talk about the gameplay now. The The world undoubtedly is beautiful, and thankfully, the game doesn't skip out on activities you can do either, especially during key moments within the story. You can go homestead robbing with Javier, stagecoach robbing with Bill and Tilly, where you see them argue the whole time.
What'd you say to me?
I didn't say enough to you, you useless half-man.
Half-man? Half-man, what does that even mean?
Will you two stop arguing?
He started it.
Here's the goddamn stagecoach. We doing this?
Yes. Both of you, follow me!
What's the plan?
There's been a change of plan!
Yes, you act dumb and get them to stop.
Or even fishing with Karen or crawfish hunting with Pearson. But this game is still a Wild West fantasy through and through, with you being able to rob trains, townsfolk, and fight off bounty hunters, or even make an honest living by selling animal pelts, meats, fish, or even do a little bounty hunting yourself.
Fella well, it ain't nothing nice. A lot of folk disappeared over the past few years. This sick son of a bitch, well, he ain't right in the head.
That's so.
And with technology not really being a factor in the 1800s, Rockstar had to really tailor the details and activities available to make a real expansive and lifelike Wild West experience. Weapons get dirty and degrade over time, with its conditions actually having an effect on its usefulness. And if you don't take care of that, ultimately you do end up running the risk of it jamming on you if you don't. There's also a few different ammo types, having different uses. You have velocity and express rounds for better long range or overall lethality, or you can just say fuck it and use standard rounds to get the job done. If you're constantly killing and skinning animals, you can even take the animal fat from their carcass and use it to craft explosive rounds at a campfire. Or, you can just sit down, slice the bullet heads into split points. The campfire by itself actually has a lot of uses. Besides what I already mentioned, you can cook to be able to eat meat to help replenish your cores, sleep to fast forward time, craft bait, or even fast travel if you upgrade the Linde Gang's hideout enough. I believe it's actually Dutch's cabin you have to upgrade for it, which is about $300. But the world is also rich with gangs, with some of the areas of the map having ambushes waiting for you, or you can even take the fight to the gang's hideout, clearing them all out. During the chapter at Clemens Point, the Lemoyne Raiders are a giant problem, while during the chapter at Beaver Hollow, they introduce the Murfrees, cannibalistic cave dwellers that ambush people on the main road and take them back to get ready to eat them. Well, later on in the game when you're playing as John, the Linde Gang in the south is what you'd most likely see more of. I also really love how they brought back GTA's random events and Stranger and Freaks mission, but this time being much more frequent and frankly, more memorable. In Saint Denis, you'll see a man get rushed to the doctor's office to get an arm amputated, or two people fighting in the street with one of them actually getting a bucket of shit thrown at them. And some of the people you come across actually even remember you.
I've been bitten by a snake. I need medicine. Or you need to suck the venom out. Please, sir. I don't want to die. Help me. I can feel the poison in my veins.
Okay. I have an idea. Not a word to anyone. Got me?
This here's the feller. The one that found me. This feller? You let him suck on your leg?
But every great game isn't without its faults, and this game on console has a pretty big one, and that is the shooting's kind of abysmal. I just went to play it on the PlayStation 5, which also hasn't been updated to play at 60 frames, and I can't really tell a difference with the load times from PlayStation 4 to 5. I don't know if that's been taken advantage of, but either way, on console you pretty much have to rely on aim assist and snapping onto targets, because the free aim feels like you're trying to aim by using your entire forearm and not just your thumb to move the analog stick. If you have the option, I would recommend you play on PC rather than on console, but even then, that version isn't without its problems. The Rockstar Games launcher, for whatever reason, has to have an active internet connection in order for you to start this game up, even on story mode, which in today's day and age where most people are getting their games digitally and about 80 to 90% of people do have an active internet connection. In moments like recently or last month where the GTA Definitive Edition on PC had files leaked, and for a couple days no one can play GTA 5 or Red Dead Redemption 2 story because their servers was shut down, it just goes to show that that's kind of a bigger problem than you expect, because it makes you you feel like you paid $60, a AAA games price, to just rent the game out whenever their servers are active. And as far as the console problem goes, I mean, if you have no option but to play it on console, the overall experience, the story is still great. Personally for me though, once I kind of acknowledged that problem of the aiming kind of being atrocious, it's such a big element to the overall gameplay, and it's so fun to use all these weapons, from the revolvers, there's pistols, there's a full auto pistol, a pump action shotgun, double barrel shotgun, using all these killing instruments, and the shooting is kind of a chore, not as satisfying as it could be. It's a little bit of a downer, and I hope that in the next Red Dead, and ultimately in Grand Theft Auto 6, the shooting gets honed in just a little bit more, because I think it would benefit Rockstar creatively and even the gaming industry as a whole if they can really piggyback from Grand Theft Auto to Red Dead and they continue to innovate and expand and make these two games flow into one another rather than against each other, which is something I would say we've seen with this game's multiplayer. It ultimately got cannibalized because Take-Two was so focused on the success and the continuous growth of Grand Theft Auto Online that Red Dead Online never really got a chance to grow. But that's getting into an entirely different beast. To wrap this up, Red Dead Redemption 2 has aged like fine wine. Narratively, graphically, the gameplay is damn near almost perfect without that problem with the shooting, and I can only imagine the kind of beast that Red Dead Redemption 3 is going to be. But let me know what you guys think. If you guys stood all the way to the end of this video and got to this point, a shout out to you. Normally I don't make videos even half as long as this, but I wanted to do something special, or at least memorable, for this game that I still continue to go back to, and it shows how much potential and how great Rockstar is at creating games. If they actually put in the effort, they can still continue to set the standards. But they've also shown time and again that they can also be incredibly lazy and just do whatever they can to get a quick buck, which is unfortunate. But I want to end this on a good note. If you guys played Red Dead Redemption 2, what is your favorite scene or your most memorable quote? I think my favorite scene would have to be the end, where Arthur finally says goodbye to John. He hands off all his stuff, and you know, right before that, John is basically pushing him to go on, and he says nah, he's got nothing left in the tank. That's it. He knows that he's done for. I think that entire scene is tear-jerking. But until next time, I'll see y'all later.
No, I think I've pushed all I can. Come on, you go.
We ain't got time for this, not now.
We ain't both gonna make it. Go. Now, I'll hold him off. It would mean a lot to me. Please. There ain't no more time for talk.